All right, so we are still on the crazy roller coaster ride of Trump's tariff policy and approach. So, as you know, over the weekend, we had planned to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico, ranging from like 25% to 50% across the board. Of course, Mexico and Canada issued retaliatory tariffs. And then Monday, we find out that according to the White House, that Mexico and Canada have both basically succumbed and conceded, and now Mexico will be sending like 10,000 troops to the border to help with um, border security, and Canada will be also, I think, sending some troops and just overall modernizing their border security, instituting drones and air patrol and shit like that. So, MAGA, of course, is taking this as a giant win. Like, we're so tired of winning. We can't stop winning. Like, congratulations. What a win for the fucking American people. We already talked about how immigrants are not the reason why your grocery prices are high, why your wages suck, why your healthcare sucks, why we have 700,000 homeless people, a lot of them being US veterans. So, yeah, MAGA is taking it as a big win, and Trump's such a strong man, but anyone with a reasonable mind can see this is just childish. We're making the US look like fools on the world stage, and we're just, how can you make future deals and alliances with other countries when every 4 to 8 years you can have a Republican administration come in and just rip up everything? Like everything. World Health Organization, Paris Climate Agreement, the Iran deal from his first term, threatening to pull out of NATO. Like, this is big stuff. And the whole going back and forth on our stances with our allies has been a lot more extreme in, the past decade or so. And I feel like that's eventually going to catch up to us. But I could make a whole video on that. So, short story short, we are just doing these tariffs to not get fucking, we're isolating our allies, and we aren't getting wins for the American people. Canada toughening their border security, Mexico toughening their border security is not going to magically solve the fentanyl crisis, all right? It's not going to lower your prices. It's not going to raise your wages. It's not going to improve your health care. But yet, MAGA is going to take these as huge wins, and it's exhausting. So, along with the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, we had also imposed an additional 10% tariff, I believe, across the board against China under the same guise, mainly fentanyl. And stick around to the end because I have a really interesting article we're going to go over, just kind of debunking like 95% of the Trump administration's claims and how they're framing all this. But anyways, okay, I'm done rambling and bearing the lead here. So we're going to start with the China tariff situation. So China targets U.S. coal, gas, Google as Trump tariffs take effect. And this is from NPR. So, China is not taking the Trump administration's tariffs sitting down. On Tuesday, shortly after the 10% tariffs took effect, just past midnight on the U.S. East Coast, Beijing announced a raft of countermeasures. Those include 15% tariffs on American coal and liquefied natural gas, and 10% tariffs on crude oil, farm equipment, and certain other vehicles. The Chinese counter tariffs are slated to take effect on February 10th. In a statement, the Chinese Finance Ministry said that the U.S. tariffs severely violated World Trade Organization rules and not only fails to address America's own problems, but also disrupt economic and trade cooperation between China and the United States. Man, it's crazy when China is more based and giving more base takes than the US. I'm just calling it how I see it. Call me a fucking commie, a CCP shill or whatever. But the tariffs we're doing don't make sense. You don't use tariffs as a threat to get some kind of fucking policy you want. Tariffs are meant to be used strategically to encourage buying of domestic products. And before you issue tariffs, you should make sure that you can sufficiently meet the demand back home, or else consumers, the American people, are just going to needlessly suffer and front those higher expenses. So, across the board tariffs, like, Jesus, it's stupid. And it's working for now in the case of like Colombia, Mexico, and Canada, but it's not going to work forever. And you're just, as I said, you're just ruining our image on the world stage. And you're just making us a joke. Of course, MAGA thinks that they're making us look strong, but you're not. You're not. I hate to say it. So, in addition, China's market regulator announced an anti-monopoly investigation into Google, and the Commerce Ministry and Customs Administration jointly announced fresh export controls on a handful of rare metals, including tungsten, indium, and molybdenum. I'm not a rare earth mineral guy, so forgive my pronunciations. China's Commerce Ministry also put the U.S. firms PVH Group and Illumina Inc. on its unreliable entity list, saying they violated market principles and adopted discriminatory measures against Chinese companies. PVH is the parent company of brands including Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. Those announcements did not explicitly mention the U.S. tariffs. Trump signed orders for the tariffs against China, Canada, and Mexico over the weekend in a bid to pressure those countries to do more to stop the flow of migrants and illegal drugs, including fentanyl, in the United States. The tariffs on Mexico and Canada have been put on hold for at least a month after last-minute negotiations led to both countries agreeing to boost border security. What a great win to the American people. And just stick around to the final article we have here on why this, especially from Canada's end, is just a fucking joke, man. So Julian Evans Pritchard, head of China economics at the research firm Capital Economics, said in a note that retaliatory measures were fairly modest. He estimated that the targeted goods represent at most $20 billion worth of annual imports, or around 12% of China's total imports from the U.S., a fraction of the more than $450 billion in Chinese goods subject to the 10% tariff. He said the retaliation was calibrated to send a message without inflicting too much damage and leaving China an option to back down. But there is a risk that retaliation backfires by encouraging Trump to escalate tariffs further. So far, we haven't seen evidence that Trump is going to double down and increase tariffs, but who knows? Normally, you can just give him a phone call and say, hey, we're going to do better border security, and we'll stop the flow of fentanyl. And he'll be like, great, we won the trade war. U.S. is so strong. Evans Pritchard added that de-escalating the standoff might be challenging. The underlying economic and political grievances between China and the U.S. run far deeper than those between the U.S. and its neighbors, he said. China is a major source of the precursor chemicals to make fentanyl, and Beijing says it has gone out of its way to help curb the flow of synthetic opioid into America. After Trump announced his latest tariffs, China warned that they would damage prospects for future cooperation and vowed to launch a case against them in the WTO. Trump has warned that he could increase the tariffs on China further. Earlier, Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, said Trump was due to talk to Chinese leader Xi Jinping in the next 24 hours. So we will see how that conversation goes. I'm interested to see, but I'm kind of getting all over the place here just because that's what these tariffs are. They're all over the place, so I'm going to be all over the place. All right, deal with it. So I have another article here that's so funny regarding the MAGA people and them celebrating these giant wins against, Mexico, Canada, and Colombia, how they folded to all of our demands. So I didn't report on this, but there was a case from Colombia that, they backed down from their tariffs and they're going to accept deportees and blah, blah, blah. The White House, of course, came out and said that was a big victory, and in summary, basically said, hey, nothing's changing. These bitches are going to take them whether they like it or not. Well, turns out that there were actually concessions made by the Trump administration. They just didn't advertise them. I guess according to the Colombian administration, prisoners will actually be treated with a little dignity now. Maybe not handcuffed because, or sorry, did I say prisoners? These aren't even these aren't criminals that we are deporting in most cases. Like, they're just people that they're criminals in the sense that they came here illegally. So, and we're going to be even seeing cases where even people who came here legally and went through legal processes will be deported. So, yeah. So basically, we did concede a little bit, but of course, the Trump administration acts like nothing changed and presents it as a big win, and the MAGA loyalists, of course, incapable of reasoning or research, blindly go, hey, tariffs are good. Who says tariffs aren't good? They're working. They're accomplishing so much. Even though, like, what we have gained is fucking nothing tangible for the American people. All right, so Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo issued a readout of her call with U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday, but her list of what the two leaders agreed to is different from his in one major respect: guns. More guns flow into Mexico than flow into the U.S., a fact that Vice President J.D. Vance was corrected on during the vice presidential debate. There is long-standing evidence showing the gun smuggling route is going in the opposite direction, said NPR in the report. Most recently, the Mexican Attorney General of the Republic and the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives made an effort to trace the origin and number of firearms in Mexico coming from or through the United States. The report continued. Mexico's Secretary of Foreign Relations found that 70 to 90% of traced firearms originated from and passed through the U.S. Wow. The ATF and U.S. Government Accountability Office estimated a lower rate of 68%. So that's crazy. It's almost like, so are we like, is this like when we were, not directly, but like, remember how like back in the 80s or 90s, whatever the fuck, that we were like funding like this, we had one government agency funding one terrorist group and another government agency funding another terrorist group that were fighting each other. Is this like another thing where we're just indirectly fucking funding like our enemies and as like the cartel? I wonder how many of the cartel's guns are coming from America. Like, I've done no research on that, but I just wonder. So Trump announced that Mexico had agreed to send 10,000 troops to the U.S. border, which caused him to threaten tariffs on the country. Oh, wait, sorry. I just fucking missed the most important part. In Trump's readout of the call, the White House neglected to mention that the new president agreed to stop U.S. guns crossing the border. So yeah, to anyone who's saying that, like, oh, Mexico just bent blindly and we got everything and they got nothing. No, it turns out that we have to step up our act too and maybe not have like fucking 70 to 80% of guns in Mexico coming from the U.S. So that's funny. And of course, you know, Trump doesn't mention it. His supporters don't mention it. And I wonder what's going to come out from Canada. Like, surely we probably conceded something to them too. But of course, you're not going to hear that from the White House or the Trump administration. And MAGA is going to continue celebrating these tariffs as giant wins, even though we're normally conceding something in return. And these wins they're not helping the American people. They're not. So this is the real meat and potatoes I wanted to get into. That just kind of makes this whole thing so funny. So from the NPR, Trump used fentanyl to justify tariffs, but the crisis was already easing. President Trump says illegal street fentanyl is one of the main justifications for sweeping trade tariffs he plans to impose against Canada, China, and Mexico on Tuesday. A statement issued by the White House described the synthetic opioid as fueling a national emergency that warranted tough action. Experts say the reality is far more complex. President Trump and his team mistake key facts about the fentanyl crisis. On Inauguration Day, Trump said foreign drug cartels are killing 250,000 or 300,000 American people per year. On Friday, White House spokesperson Caroline Levitt said tariffs are warranted because fentanyl has killed tens of millions of Americans. These claims are false. While the overdose epidemic is a serious crisis, experts in law enforcement, drug policy, and research in public health agree street drugs have killed vastly fewer people. During the most severe period of opioid crisis in 2022 and 2023, total overdose deaths, including fentanyl, methamphetamines, heroin, cocaine, and all other drugs, peaked at around 114,000 fatalities per year. And while drug overdose deaths have been wrenching for many families, fentanyl deaths haven't come close to killing tens of millions of people. State and federal data also showing the crisis was improving at an unprecedented pace before these tariffs were announced. Fatal overdoses from fentanyl and all other street drugs have plummeted nationally by more than 21% since June 2023, according to the latest data from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, falling below 90,000 deaths in a 12-month period. Still a lot, by the way, but it was measurably going down. What role does Canada play in the U.S. fentanyl supply? This is my favorite part when it comes to fucking slapping 25% tariffs on a close ally and a big trading partner, Canada. So, what role does Canada play? Almost none. In its fact sheet, the Trump administration says Canada has a growing footprint in narcotics distribution with Mexican cartels active in the country, but law enforcement and drug policy experts agree that Canada plays a minimal role in fentanyl smuggling into the U.S. During remarks Saturday night, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said smuggling from Canada contributes to less than 1% of the fentanyl street supply in the U.S. Data from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration supports Trudeau's claim. In 2024, only about 43 pounds of fentanyl were seized at America's northern border. That compares to 21,100 pounds seized at the southern border. So yeah, we got a big win by fucking bullying our ally Canada. What a big fucking win we got. I'm glad that we bullied them into stepping up their fucking border security. What a win. Such a joke on the world stage, man. So before these tariffs were announced, Canadian law enforcement had already moved to target and crack down on fentanyl producers, hoping to curb the overdose crisis occurring in their own country. So Canada is already working on it. What role does Mexico play in the U.S. fentanyl supply? The White House fact sheet says the Mexican drug trafficking organizations have intolerable alliance with the government of Mexico. It's widely accepted that drug cartels in Mexico produce the vast majority of street fentanyl flowing into the U.S. The previous Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador adopted a controversial hugs, not bullets approach to drug gangs. Most cartel experts say they have managed to corrupt many government officials. But under Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, enforcement actions against drug gangs have escalated, as has cooperation with U.S. law enforcement officials targeting the cartels and their finances. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the amount of fentanyl seized by the U.S. on the southern border plunged last year by roughly 20%, and the potency of fentanyl pills also declined sharply. So these problems were already being addressed through actual diplomatic means before Trump got into office, and you could see that they were already starting to go down. And Trump goes in and acts like it's a problem that's growing and bigger than ever and starts a trade war with two of our biggest allies. So that's great. What role does China play in the U.S. fentanyl supply? Law enforcement agencies and government officials in the U.S. agree most of the so-called precursor chemicals used to make street fentanyl flow from industrial companies in China to drug gangs in Mexico. For years, China's government infuriated U.S. officials by resisting efforts to target and disrupt the supply chain. Under pressure from the Biden administration, however, Chinese officials implemented new regulations last year to help crack down on money laundering by drug organizations and made some arrests. By October 2024, a growing number of U.S. officials and experts on fentanyl smuggling told NPR these measures were finally squeezing the pipeline of fentanyl reaching the American streets, making the drug harder to find. In a statement, China's foreign ministry said U.S. tariffs scheduled to go in effect on Tuesday and will undermine cooperation against drug trafficking. So yeah, China was already doing something. Mexico was already doing something. Canada was already doing something. And the numbers showed it. And what does Trump do? Starts a fucking trade war because of that. And you're just harming our reputation and our word and these deals that we've made to combat this with these countries. Like, these countries are doing, China crack down, Canada crack down, Mexico crack down, and then you have Trump saying, why aren't you cracking down? I'm going to slap 25% tariffs on you. Like, it's ridiculous. And like, this is a problem that the US has to internally face as well. I'm going to have my crazy, radical, unhinged, extreme leftists come out here for a second. But you want to know how you can greatly decrease the amount of overdoses and fentanyl deaths in the US? Decriminalization and legalization and regulation of pretty much all drugs. Because then you can have it regulated, and we can also expand towards efforts for rehabilitation, treatment. That's all. You can even take the decriminalization and legalization part out if that's not your cup of tea. I understand it's not a lot of people's. It's kind of like prohibition. There's a lot of problems with prohibition. Like, banning alcohol was not a solution, and it made things worse. The same for a lot of drugs. So, but if you remove decriminalization and legalization, there's a lot we can do internally to address this problem. One, more treatment centers, rehabilitation centers, and sorry to slide back into decriminalization at least, but stop treating people who have these drug problems as criminals and actually try to get them the help they need. So it's things like that. And I always circle back to this. You can solve a lot of issues in this country by addressing root problems: wealth inequality, lowering grocery prices, raising wages, building more homes so people can actually buy affordable homes. You have all these root issues where you have like an absurd amount of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, an absurd amount of Americans in medical debt. So, in my opinion, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you have all these financial struggles, which leads to unhappiness, which leads to drug use, to fucking take the edge off of the fucking shitty society, the oligarchic, I don't know if that's a word, the oligarch society that we fucking live in. Like, you won't have so many people turning to drugs. And I don't know, is that a radical thought? Like, if you address, and it's the same as I've said for racism and transphobia, homophobia, just anything. If you address root causes and materially improve people's lives, the amount of hatred and blaming, and I'm also saying drug use, would all steeply decline, in my opinion. But yeah, that is all I got for you. I would like to know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next one. If you made it to this point in the video, I just want to give a special thank you. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button down below, and if you really enjoyed it, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button while you're down there. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. I will try to reply to any and all comments that I can. Until next time, watch that video on screen.